What is chest voice and how do you sing in it? If you've ever asked that question, then stay tuned for today's episode of Singing Tips with LJD Studios, the space where we take difficult singing concepts, break them down so you can actually understand them and implement them for better singing. I'm Laura, and today we're talking about chest voice. But before we get into it, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and if you haven't already, download my free guide, The 3-Tiered Approach to Becoming a Better Singer, linked in the description. And without further ado, what is chest voice and how do you sing in it? Chest voice is one of the lower registers in your voice. And if you haven't seen my video on demystifying vocal registers, make sure you check that out. It's linked in the description. But I like to think of registers in this way. If you have a house, right? If you've ever lived in a house or been in a house, right? It's one house, but within that house, you have multiple rooms, possibly many, right? You also have one voice. Within that voice, you have different rooms. And so I like to think of registers as the rooms of your house, right? You can sort of live in one more than the other. And then where it gets really fun is you can have an open floor plan. So you might be in the kitchen, but the kitchen and the living room are all one big room, right? That can happen too. So I'm not going to go too far down that rabbit hole of this analogy, but just know, like, yes, you have one voice, but these registers are sort of places where you might land and stay in this one little room in your voice. So chest voice is one of the lower registers in your voice. And if you guys have been watching any of my videos or following me, you know I like to kind of first talk really specifically like, okay, what's happening anatomically, and I try to keep it as simple as possible, but sometimes that's a little overwhelming. So then after that, then we'll talk about, okay, now how do you actually like do the thing, okay? But for those of you who like to understand the anatomy, and if you've seen any of my other videos on registration, you're probably tired of hearing this piece of it, but you've got two primary muscles that are responsible for putting your vocal cords into different configurations. The configuration that you ultimately end up in your vocal cords is going to sort of decide what register you're in. So you've got one muscle that either shortens or thickens the vocal cords for lower or heavier sounds. And you've got one muscle that lengthens or thins the vocal cords for higher or lighter sounds. They are both pretty much all the time, except for in falsetto, participating. And it's the relationship between those two muscles that really kind of decides the configuration of your chords and decides what register you're in, okay? So when you are in chest voice, there's gonna be a little bit more of that muscle that's shortening and thickening your vocal cords because it is a lower register. Okay, so how do you actually sing in chest voice? It's nice to kind of know like anatomically what's going on, but that doesn't always help us access that part of our voices. So one thing to note is that the distance between most people's everyday speaking voice and your singing chest voice is very short. So I'll give you an example. I'm not going to get too much into head voice in this video because I have a separate video on that. But if I were to speak in head voice, it would sound like this. And you might think I was a little weird if I was going around talking like this, right? Like there might be a few pretentious opera singers out there that speak like this, but for the most part, nobody talks like that, right? And so it doesn't matter if you have a high voice or a low voice. Most people don't speak with this kind of lofty, round, hooty quality that head voice has, right? We speak more down here in what I would call more of a chest voice. So you can use your speaking voice to help teach you how to sing in chest voice. And here's how you're going to do it. Start by just taking a short phrase. I'm just going to count to 5 and do it a few times. My recommendation would be to do it a little higher and a little louder than where you would ordinarily speak, because I think it's really tempting to just kind of be like this and be like, okay, fine, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But you can hear like this doesn't have a lot of energy in it. So that's not going to help your singing a whole lot. So instead I'm going to take it up here and I'm going to be a little louder and I'm going to be a little higher, but I'm still in my speaking voice. And I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And just pay attention to how that feels. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, now I am going to say that very monotone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And as I'm speaking it really monotone like this, you can hear that is a very specific pitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so now I'm really singing in chest voice. Now there are other factors that go into making a tone sound sung versus spoken. One of which would be the presence of vibrato. So I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to let a little vibrato come through. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll have to do a separate video on how to add vibrato to your singing, but that right there made it sound a lot more sung, right? The other thing that takes something from speech quality to sung quality is the way we sustain the vowel. And I would check out my video on the singer's language for that, because sustaining the vowel is a huge part of what takes something from speech to singing. But right, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's speech. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? That's more sung sounding, though the vibrato is really what kind of helps it along a little. But despite all of that, I would say when I am singing it, it feels identical to when I am speaking it monotone. It's a very, very short distance between speaking and singing in chest voice. They feel really similar. So using your speaking voice can really help you find that. Now that is a fairly light version of chest voice. And if you are someone who defaults to more of a head voice style of singing in general, and if you find that as you get lower in your voice, it gets weak and it gets breathy, and if you're doing this speech level, I don't want to call it speech level singing because that's like a thing, but using your speech to inform your chest voice, if you're doing that and you're like, nope, it's still coming out really light and breathy, then I would suggest going more toward really stern speech. So I have a dog and she's very sweet, but sometimes she's a jerk or sometimes she's just bad, right? And you have to let the dog know you're mad, right? And so I'm going to use my I mean it voice and go, no, bad dog, I mean it. I'm not yelling, though it's slightly raised in volume, but it's just stern, right? I call it your I mean it voice. So now you could use your I mean it voice, and if it helps to use a phrase that you would use in sort of like an angry way, you could do that. But now I'm going to use my I mean it voice, and I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'm going to make it monotone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm just going to sustain it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? And now I've got this like just bigger sound. You can go one step further and take it to a full-on yell. I would only suggest that if you're trying this and you're finding that it's still coming out weak or breathy or feeling more like this, then sometimes it helps to go to that extreme of singing in a yell. Eventually, you're going to want to move it more toward the stern speech or just regular speech and away from a full-on yell, just because you're going to experience probably some strain at some point if you're singing like you're yelling. But you can use it to help you get into more of a chest voice. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It doesn't feel great, but I am in chest voice, okay? So whether you are speaking normally, speaking sternly, or yelling, the mechanics of that really similar to what you're going to have in chest voice. So you almost have to disassociate from this concept of I am singing, especially, again, if your habit is to be more in head voice. You might just have to disassociate from that entirely and just think, I'm not singing, I'm talking. I'm not singing, I'm being mad. I'm not singing, I'm yelling, to really help you get into chest voice. Don't worry about if it sounds good, right? Eventually you can tweak it, but this is just about like, how do I get there? So after all of this, you're probably wondering, why do we call it chest voice? The terms that most people use for vocal registers come from a time before we knew anything about the way the voice was actually operating, back when opera was the primary type of singing being taught, and we didn't have cameras that you could stick down people's throats to see what was going on. So voice teachers were just using words that defined what they felt when they were singing rather than had any bearing on what might actually be going on. So if you speak sternly or if you yell, you'll likely feel like there's vibration in your chest. Yell, yell. You might even like feel it on your hand, right? And then to contrast that, and if you're interested in learning more about head voice, I've got another video on how to sing in head voice. But to contrast that right now, just put your hands on your head and go, woo, woo, woo. You might feel like, oh yeah, that feels like it's more here. And the yelly one felt like it was more here. That's where that comes from. It just feels like it's centered a little bit more here. And I kind of went on this tangent in the head voice video, but there's been this big push in the voice world to kind of get away from this language and this way of talking about registration because it's not really correct. However, I really think the experience that you have as a singer matters. The sensations that you feel in your body matter, and that there's a place for metaphor. And so when you are trying to eventually transition between registers, one thing that can be really helpful is thinking about the sound moving from here to here. I've seen that help lots of singers. And so I have not dismissed this idea. So I still like the terms chest voice and head voice. I'm still going to use them. I still think the idea of focusing on resonance being here or being here or being here or being here can be really helpful to lots of singers. But just know that's where chest voice gets its name. It's kind of archaic, but I also think it has a place in our modern world of teaching and understanding singing. So that's that. Thanks again for joining for another episode of Singing Tips with LJD Studios. As always, you guys feel free to shoot me a comment and let me know if there are any specific videos that you'd like to see me do. I'm always looking for more ideas. I'd love to break things down for you. If you've ever had any questions and you're like, I don't understand how this works, let me try to explain it for you. Otherwise, happy singing and good luck.